But yeah, so we are going to talk through all the action of this weekend's French Grand Prix, and it was another quite nice mix of on-track action, pit stop, dramas, and strategy that kind of took place across the whole race. It wasn't the case that it was all action at the start or at the end. It was sort of dispersed throughout, which I guess stopped you from turning it off.
Yeah, there was a bit of a lull. I think the race really benefited, and I know like Pirelli have not been in the good books this year, but I think it benefited from the teams not knowing what the hell was going on with the tyres. Mm-hmm. Pressures had changed a little bit before the race, and so when it actually got to doing race runs, the teams had or didn't know whether it was a one stop or a two stop basically, and had to gamble or play it safe, and that's what I think it all pretty much came down to.
Yeah. The race kind of started off with its own little bit of drama. We had Max on pole, and he was closely followed by Lewis Hamilton, then Valtteri Bottas, and Sergio Perez was fourth. And while it looked like Max had the start and had the jump, he had a little bit of a wobble just coming out of turn one, which gave Hamilton the chance to jump in front and take the lead of the race. And like you say, at that point, it was another one where it seemed like it was sliding into place. Lewis was going to hold the fort, he was going to win, it was all going to be fine. But it all came down to tyre management and tyre strategy as the race went on, didn't it?
Yes. And again, we talk about him every week, it seems, being able to manage his tyres brilliantly. Sergio Perez had a blinder managing his tyres that really set him up for a good race. And boy, is he a good team player. He knows that he is just grateful to be in Formula One at the moment. So, and he wants to win a World Championship. And if he's part of a World Championship winning team, I'd argue that a lot of that is dependent on him. And so he can kind of take that as a World Championship. But it was kind of at the front where it was all decided, where Max performed the first undercut and managed to get back in the lead, didn't he?
Yeah, I was quite shocked by how effective that undercut would be. Because initially it was a bit strange that Bottas pitted first for Mercedes, because he was obviously not the lead driver, and usually they would give the lead driver the first pit stop. But Bottas pitted, and then Max pitted, and then Lewis pitted after that, and Lewis came out behind Max purely because of the sort of couple of seconds, that second advantage that undercut was worth. I did do some reading after the race, and apparently the decision to pit Bottas early was because he was reporting quite a bit of vibration. So the team were worried about that being potentially terminal for the car. So that was the reason behind him coming in sooner. But yeah, after the first stage of pit stops, Lewis was back behind and was no longer leading the race.
No. And during those pit stops, I actually think, because Perez led the race for a little while, didn't he? Where he stayed out for a lot longer than everyone else, as has been the case so many times this season. And like you say, he was just kind of nursing his tyres.
The other person that I think is worth mentioning that also stayed out a bit longer was McLaren's Lando Norris. He didn't pit until lap 24, and at the time he seemed to be a little bit nervous with his engineers about why they'd left him out so long. But that proved to be the way to make the one-stop strategy work. If you weren't prepared to wait a bit longer on the mediums that you started on, then you were sort of going to be forced into a two-stop, it seemed.
Yeah. Because did Lando have a terrible start?
Not terrible, but yeah, he dropped back about like 3 or 4 places, which I guess is pretty terrible. And
then he had a little battle with Daniel, didn't he? I think one of those places was losing to Daniel Ricciardo, because he seemed to then just like Daniel. They then charged back through the field, and it was like Lando was just sitting behind Daniel, like, you do the hard work, and then I'll pick up the scraps, and you do the hard work, I'll pick it up, and then at some point in the race, I'll just overtake you, and you've done all the hard work, and then I'll be faster than you.
It seemed like it was a bit of teamwork ganging up on, like they'd find a weak one.
Yeah.
So like the one I remember was Alonso, who was kind of getting to the end of his tyre life, and Daniel found a gap and went through, and then while Alonso was sort of slower and moving out the way, Lando just darted in as well, and two of them got past the Alpine in sort of 2 corners or so.
And then another 2 drivers, actually, that I think are probably worth a mention for their tyre management. Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll. They stayed out on pretty long stints, as seems to be the way with Aston Martin. Maybe this is where Sergio Perez learnt his trade. Maybe it's like a tactic that they've given to him. But yeah, Lance had a good race, having crashed out in qualifying in Q1. Did he?
Yes.
He did, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Managing to work his way up into the points. And it's all thanks to doing a really long stint.
It was a nice double points finish for both of them. They finished 9th and 10th. And like you say, Lance had started right at the back. Actually, I think he was 19th in the end because Yuki Tsunoda had his penalty. And then Seb Vettel, he started about 13th, I think it was. 12th. He started 12th and managed to make up 3 places through the race.
Yeah.
So both of them showing that they've got the moves to get past people on what is traditionally a tricky overtaking circuit.
Yeah, I think there's one spot where you can overtake, isn't there? There's just one spot. Well, there in the start. But yeah, there was then a reverse of fortunes, wasn't there, for Ferrari? You know, just thinking there where you said that Seb had a good race and made it from 13th up to 9th. 2 of those places were I can't even say the terrible Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, who both finished out the points.
Yeah, it was complete polar opposite of the last 2 races where it's been quite victorious. Yes, look, Ferrari are back. To see them just fall down.
It's dreadful.
It's not what you want. So they Leclerc qualified in 7th, which was like not a bad starting point. And then Sainz was just ahead of him in 5th. So they did kind of look like they'd got something, but it just seems like they're lacking in race pace. I don't know if that's like to do with the power, draggy car, something like that. But I was reading an interview with Carlos Sainz, and he said that they'd been a bit fearful of the French Grand Prix, and thought that it would be one that they'd do a bit rubbish at. So it must be something about the circuit that car's just not suited to. But yeah, really...
Rubbish.
Pardon?
Not that rubbish.
Yeah. It really gave McLaren the chance to gather the points and hold on to 3rd in the Constructors after they were seemingly quite close and dicey.
It's such a shame as well on the weekend that Ferrari were running their special livery without the terrible Mission Winnow green back fin.
Yeah, it looks so much better.
Yeah.
And did you see Charles's snazzy helmet design for the weekend?
Yes, the Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you see how he unveiled it on Thursday, and then when he finally wore it on Friday in free practice, he had to have like a yellow sticker over it because it was an Estrella logo that wasn't allowed. Interesting thing that I learned about Paul Ricard. For those of you that don't know, Paul Ricard is the founder of Ricard Pastis, which is a massive deal in France and is now part of Pernod Ricard, which own pretty much every spirit brand you've heard of. And apparently, one of the reasons that he built the Paul Ricard circuit is because there's such strict alcohol advertising laws in France. So he wanted to have something with his name on that people could associate with his brand.
Wow.
And it could, there's a little loophole around the old advertising ban. That's not confirmed. Some people say it was just because he liked racing, but
I was going to say what the shame about that is it's definitely the first time anyone listening to this has ever heard that is the reason why. So no one associates it with that at all.
No. But it was a nice little...
Yeah, it's a good fact.
Little link. Back on the track, though. the action did continue after the pit stops, and it kind of started to become apparent that maybe Mercedes and Red Bull were going to have to think about a two-stop strategy, because both Mercedes drivers were moaning about, like, not excessive but faster than expected tyre wear.
Everyone did.
What, sorry?
Everyone was saying that they were degrading a lot faster than they thought.
Yeah, some reports have said it was to do with the higher pressures, the cooler temperatures, but it was like one step harder than we'd had at the last few races with the tyres, so I don't know, they just seem a bit unpredictable this year, don't they?
Yeah, which is bad for the teams, but I quite enjoy a bit of tyre drama.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice to mix it up where you're sort of forced to make a late stop for some reason, or your strategy doesn't quite work out. But so Red Bull called Max in for a second stop, which put him about like 25 seconds back on Lewis and Valtteri, which meant we just got sort of 10 or 15 laps of Max putting in faster and faster times, and you just seeing that gap eke down slowly but surely, so that it came to sort of the final 5 laps or so where Valtteri was tasked with defending against him, and I've seen his defending come under fire a little bit. What did you think? Did he do an adequate job? Would you have fired him on the spot for not holding up Max long enough?
No, I feel so sorry for Valtteri this weekend, to be honest. I think he's a bit of a sitting duck. I mean, ultimately, Max got past Lewis pretty easily. It's not Valtteri's job to stop Max from overtaking Lewis. It's Valtteri's job to stop Max from overtaking himself, and no one was stopping Max this weekend. But Valtteri Bottas did say, should we do plan B? Very early on. He could see the race unfolding. And no one listened to him.
No. We had his outburst, which was not something that you see very often from Valtteri. He's normally quite kind of calm and collected. So
he's done, isn't he? I think he's done. I think he won't be sad to leave Mercedes next year.
No, I feel like he's maybe always hoped that, not that they'd take him seriously, because they do obviously like take his talent seriously, but I guess maybe he's never felt as like ingrained in the team as he wanted to, and always like he was sort of a placeholder.
Yeah, I think this is part of the problem with Mercedes is they have some of the greatest minds in the paddock, but sometimes you can't. All the computer data you have it pales into insignificance compared to what the driver in the car thinks. And sometimes the driver has to listen to James, and sometimes James needs to listen to the driver, and the latter doesn't happen as often as maybe it should.
Yeah, because if they'd listened to Valtteri and gone for the 2-stop, it's been proven that was quicker. They would have easily walked away with the win. And probably first place in the drivers again. They've got a 1-2.
Yeah, because there would have been a 6-point swing to Lewis, and there was only 4 points in it at the start of the race. But then there was some sass on the radio when Bottas got passed by Perez. And was like, we should have done the 2-stop, blah, 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 blah. And then his engineer just went, Perez is also on a 1-stop. And it was like, okay, yeah, but you could have done a 2-stop and stayed in front of Perez. Yeah. You could have basically done what Verstappen is now doing to Hamilton, to Perez. It was a real shame.
Yeah, it was, like you say, he was sort of a sitting duck, and kind of after Azerbaijan, where he ended up with a completely different setup that ultimately proved to be unsuccessful for him, like a bit too draggy and slowing the car down. For him to then to be in this position where it's like, we need to do this, and the team don't listen.
Yeah.
Like, obviously you want to be in the best car, but I would have thought things like that make you think, maybe I want to look for a different team.
Yeah. Well, I hear there might be a seat coming up at Williams.
Yeah.
Who, on the basis of this week, very promising drive from George Russell. I know we kind of were going down the order of the grid earlier, But there's a lot of drivers who wouldn't mind being in that Williams this weekend, I don't think.
No, he finished 12th in the end, didn't he?
Yeah, in front of both Ferraris.
Yeah.
No safety cars, hardly a yellow flag. For most, it was a basic one-stop race. It's great.
And, it's annoying because we've seen him put in these really solid drives and come so close to points in crazy races where there's been loads of DNFs. And, the first race of the year where not a single person DNFs, he finishes in 12th.
Yeah.
So close to the points.
Yeah.
If only, Lando and Danny had taken each other out at some point.
Oh, don't say that.
No, I don't want that to happen, ever. But yeah, great drive from him. And also Alonso, we obviously mentioned that he got passed by Lando and Daniel Ricciardo. But he seems to have kind of found his form in the Alpine a little bit more now as well. We've seen Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari and Sergio in the Red Bull. They seem to find their form a little bit sooner, but it seemed like the weekend that Alonso and Daniel Ricciardo both got to grips with their new cars a little bit more.
Yeah. He outperformed Ocon, who was riding the wave of a home Grand Prix where he's just signed a deal for 3 years, which I think he's very lucky to have that. But yeah, it's good to see Alonso get up to speed. And Mick Schumacher didn't have the best race, but put it in Q2.
I know.
What?
It was slight heartbreak at the same time because he crashed at the end of Q1.
Oh no, that was... Did he crash on purpose to stop? Did he do a Charles Leclerc?
Did he do a Charles Leclerc who was doing a Michael Schumacher? Who will know?
Oh yeah, history repeating itself.
I know, yeah, great to see him in Q3. Not Q3.
Oh, wow, that would have been... Watch him do it at Austria now.
Yeah, it's going to happen. Did you see his slightly hairy moment with teammate Nikita Mazepin early on in the race?
Yeah. It's a bit of a racing incident, isn't it? I think they were just having a bit of a race.
Well. Yeah, it wasn't like in Baku where Mazepin did some slightly aggressive defensive, overly defensive driving. This more looked like there was a bit of a gap. You might as well try and go for it.
Yeah, and it was more they were side by side, and eventually the way that the kind of racing line goes, Mazepin ended up moving in front of Schumacher. It's nothing, is it? I mean, at least they're racing each other. At least, Mazepin got some practice racing another car for once. Yeah,
because we've seen Mick get a little bit dicey with people, but I guess when that car is so much slower than everyone else, they're the only people they are going to race.
Yeah.
But then, as the race continued, we had, like we mentioned, Max making his way past Valtteri, and it came down to the penultimate lap where he had the opportunity to overtake Lewis as well. And I kind of was expecting a little bit more of a fight from Lewis, but I guess his tyres were just shot to pieces and there was not really a lot he could do.
Yeah, and I mean it was Bahrain 2.0, wasn't it? Having Max chase down Lewis on a different strategy and catch him on the penultimate lap. It was like a complete mirror. But Lewis didn't really put up much of a fight then either.
No.
He was just lucky that Max pushed it a little bit too far and had to give the place back.
Yeah.
Lewis says he's patient. He wasn't necessarily patient in Baku.
No.
But he should be playing the long game. His races come in the second half of the season, where traditionally Mercedes have been brilliant at tracks like Spa, at tracks like Kota, Mexico, Japan, Russia. Just play it, take it slow, take it easy. You can claw back those points later in the year. don't bin it
No.
again.
No. Interesting fact that I found out about Max's win after he'd passed Lewis. This was the first time in his career that he's got pole, fastest lap, and the win.
Yeah, that's nuts, isn't it?
I know. I don't know why, I just assume he's done all of these things.
Well, he's still in like single digits for poles.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
It just shows, like, he's obviously an incredible driver, but how dominant that Mercedes team's been. And then, like, 2017, how competitive the Ferrari was.
Yeah.
Because there was sort of no way of getting past those four cars.
Well, it's also the first time in the hybrid era that Red Bull have won 3 races in a row.
Yeah.
I presume the only other teams to have done that are Mercedes and Ferrari.
Mm.
And I doubt Ferrari have actually done it that many times either.
No. It'll be interesting to see over the coming months, because Mercedes have supposedly sacked off developing this year's car and focusing on next year's. So if Red Bull keep pushing their package,
yeah,
it might not be as a walk in the park like we're all expecting.
No. But then, how much are Red Bull willing to sacrifice 2022?
Yeah, exactly.
And having a good head start on a new era when they've got a pretty competitive car? Because really, they only have to develop it for a few more months than Mercedes do to be in a place where they think they've got the better car.
Yeah, and they're not going to be hit with the same sort of engine issues that they had at the start of the hybrid era.
Yeah.
Like, they know that Honda engine is fast. And Max was actually running a brand new engine this weekend.
Okay.
So the extra polish might have sped him up a bit or something. Who knows?
He's just warming up for the Red Bull ring, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. So after the nicely action-filled French Grand Prix, Max is now 12 points clear of Lewis. So it is...
Is it only 12? For some reason I thought it was more than that, but it is only 12. No, the reason I felt like it was more was because I felt like Max has won more this year. 12. It's just because having a 12-point gap after like 8 races just feels unheard of.
Yeah. It is not something that we're used to. Who has won more races? 3 each.
Oh, 3 each.
I think. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, and then 1 for Perez.
Yeah. 3 each.
God, it is close, isn't it? And then they both... So in each of those races, it's always been a Hamilton, Verstappen 1-2, hasn't it?
Yeah,
apart from Monaco. Monaco, you had Carlos and Lando on the podium. And Lewis came like
miles
6th.
away.
Yeah. So that could be a really deciding race. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like we're all expecting last time out in Azerbaijan to be quite a decider, but after Lewis binned it as well,
yeah,
it sort of balanced things out again.
While we're talking post-race, I have to just mention that after the race, we'd had a pretty good race, but they had the cars on the grid, the camera was coming out to meet them as they were celebrating, and I was watching it and I was like, is that spots of rain on the camera? And literally the in-lap, it started to rain.
Oh.
I know. But maybe it didn't need it.
Supposedly there is an effect that the exhaust and the heat from the race actually like suppresses rain. And once that stops, it's more likely to rain.
Wow.
So, there you go.
That's quite a stat.
I think I heard it on another motorsport podcast rather than a scientific journal.
There are no other motorsport podcasts.
So the factual correctness may be up for some debate.
Oh no, everything that I've ever heard in a motorsport podcast has always been 100% true. I don't listen to this one though. Thank you so much for watching this French Grand Prix review. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Head over and subscribe to the Friday Formula YouTube channel for more videos like this every Friday. We're also predominantly a podcast, So the longer version of this episode will be up on Spotify, Acast, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. So for your extra Friday Formula fix, head over there. If you want to be notified whenever the podcast goes up, we have a Twitter account. Go to @FridayFormula, where there's lots of live tweet goings-ons and commentaries from the race. Or if you want to hear our personal views, you can follow us on Twitter. Our names have been on the screen this entire time. It's not just vanity. I'm Will Longman, and Owen, you are...
I'm at Owen Bellwood.
Are you not at Owen_Bellwood?
At Owen_Bellwood.
One day we'll get there. Maybe
I just got thrown because you were like, our names are on the bottom. I'm Will Longman. So I thought we were just introducing ourselves.
We also have a fantasy league, which I've been informed I am now the bottom of the pile. So the code is in the description to this video. Join it, laugh at me. It's great fun. I'm really having a good time. Thanks for joining us. Subscribe to the next episode. Have a great week. We'll see you on Friday.